Welcome to another episode of the Most Serious Podcast. And today I have a well acclaimed love, relationship, and self confidence coach. And she runs two businesses on the side. So today is going to be another mind blowing conversation with Ayushi. Thank you so much for doing this, Ayushi.
Thank you, Ripu. And I'm so honored to be here Friday morning, early morning. Let's do this.
Friday morning, we picked a interesting time to record this episode. Usually, Fridays are based around Friday nights and the whole uh, culture gearing up for the weekend. And here we are, two people sitting on a Friday morning recording a podcast together. How does that make you feel?
I'm a morning person anyway.
Okay.
I no matter what time I've slept, somehow 7:30, I wake up on my own. So yeah, I love mornings. It's so
And
quiet.
you've been a morning person throughout?
Yeah. I mean, somehow my circadian rhythm is set like that I wake up with, maybe with the sun, not with the sun, but at least like 7:38 max.
That's interesting. So I used to like waking up in the mornings, I think very early on in childhood. But when I shifted to like when you move to class 11th, 12th, and then you start, really putting in those study hours. So that's when my kind of routine shifted from an early riser to someone who stays up the whole night and studies. And I didn't really study a lot, but yeah, so you started getting into the habit of, waking up late. But I think that makes sense. So circadian rhythms, the concept is now, with the all of the biohacking conversations that are happening, I think that is something that everyone is starting to get aware of. And you
Yeah,
being,
yeah.
let's start with this. You being a person who really goes deep into the mental, emotional aspect of things with your clients. How much
Mhm.
of that do you think is driven by physiological health, like in general physical health?
A lot of it. A lot of it. It's dependent on each other every day. And we don't pay attention to that. I know that there is a lot of buzz about mental health and emotional health, which is great. But what we're doing in that is that we're missing out on talking about how important physical health is to take care of our mental health.
Yeah.
So luckily, I've had a background in biotechnology, so I love biology. So whenever I'm working with somebody and we're working about, their emotional well-being not being in place, there are a few questions I ask them in the beginning itself. I'm like, how much are you sleeping? How
Yeah.
many hours of sleep are you getting? If you're saying that you're constantly overwhelmed, and then they tell me, oh, 4 or 5 hours, I'm gonna I'm gonna give it off to them. That
Yeah.
listen, look at this, fix this first and then come back to me. And then I'll ask them, how much water are you drinking? Even if you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours, what time are you going to bed? What is the thing that you're doing right before bed? How are you eating? Is your diet based on a lot of sugars and packaged food and all of that? All of this contributes majorly to how we feel about ourselves, how we feel in general. You will see if for 5, 6 days you reduce the intake of sugar and start sleeping for 8 hours every night, your mental health will be 50% improved. I can guarantee that.
That's a crazy stat. Do you think with the so this is something I find. I was talking to another recording that I was doing through the podcast. I was talking to this guest and they were like, the amount of impatience that has grown with the accessibility that we have with the apps or with the technology in general these days, that enables our kind of mental health illnesses triggers, because you just have everything at the pick of your hand. You can just move your fingers and you get everything delivered at your door. Everything is digitalized. You don't have to meet a person. You don't have to go to new places to meet a new person. You can sit on an app and browse through and then get everything. You get your dopamine hits from Instagram reels on all those neural switches, with every context switch, with every reel that you scroll. So this is enabling a very impatient generation. Do you see that phenomenon across your clients?
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely with Instagram reels and the Swiggy and the Instamart and all of that, like Blinkits of the world. Definitely. People are not ready to wait for their own transformation. For example, if I
Hmm.
something so simple, I would tell somebody that you should start journaling, at least start writing how you're feeling. They'll write 1 day, 2 days, and then they'll be like, hey, nothing's changed. Right? So it is difficult. Again, it's not the problem of the apps. You can
Hmm.
still regulate how you function. Instagram, I
Yeah.
think, is a great tool for business owners, for creators, for us to learn so many new things. But if that's how you should channel your time, right? You can very easily time block. Have
Yeah.
you come across the concept of time blocking?
Essentially, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. You put your time on a calendar and you block it for the task that you're
Yep,
planning
yep,
to do. And yeah.
yep. And I believe that you can do that with your distractions also. If you
Hmm.
are a person who gets, carried away in watching reel after reel, then all you have to do is put 15-minute slots of watching reels on your calendar here and there and only watch reels then. You're training
Wow.
your brain that, okay, that is anyway, you're giving yourself a reward that you waited till 8:15 to do that. That's a reward in itself. And then the way our brain functions, you might not want to even exceed those 15 minutes that you've placed for yourself.
I think my work calendar is now getting an update, and post lunch, there's going to be a 15-minute block of just watching reels. That is something that I'm going to put across through my managers and everyone. Okay, this is my time blocked
Real
from my
time.
recent. Yeah. Don't mess with this time. Like coming back to your question, I
Hmm.
want to. I had this conversation, with Ekta Dikshit. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's also
Hmm.
a love relationships coach. She's been on the show, and she introduced me to this concept of revenge bedtime procrastination, which
Hmm.
is when you go to, so when you've had a very busy day, okay, and you didn't get a lot of time to yourself, okay, and now there are two choices with you.
Hmm.
You, let's say, hit the bed at 10 p.m., and now you could go to sleep 15 minutes, you do your night routine, and then you hit the bed by 10:15,
Hmm.
10:30. On the other hand, what you feel is that you didn't get any time today for yourself. So now you're going to essentially take a revenge against yourself for not getting any time for yourself. So you just constantly keep scrolling reels, even though you're sleepy. You do something just out of that FOMO
Yeah.
of not doing anything fun today. And that
Yeah.
is a very vicious cycle in which you get into. And I think that that was a very mind blowing concept. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So our brain doesn't, I mean, we consciously don't know that it's a revenge procrastination thing that we're doing.
Hmm.
For us, it's justified as, oh, I had such a productive day. Now I deserve to watch Netflix for 3 hours or binge watch
Yeah.
something. Now I deserve it. For us, consciously, it comes off as we deserve it. And then we keep justifying it constantly to ourselves. Oh, 9-hour work day, that was 3 hours of Netflix makes sense. But then
Hmm.
that creates this loop that tomorrow is not going to be that productive then.
Hmm. And how do you counteract this? If someone finds this relatable during our conversation and when they listen to this, how do they effectively immediately start working on this?
I like to replace habits with good habits,
Hmm.
but it's not very easy. It's easier said than done. So if you have a habit of Netflix binging, let's say, or reel scrolling, try to find out that morning itself or during the day sometime, what is it that you're trying to incorporate into your life? It could be reading, right? Or it could be maybe catching up with somebody you haven't spoken to in a long time.
Hmm.
Something that's a little bit more enhancing than just binging, right?
Yeah.
So find that out and then gamify it. You'll only stick to it if you've gamified it, made it fun. So, for
Hmm.
example, if you want to replace binging with reading,
Yeah.
what I've done and it has really worked for me, like first of all, I've deleted Zomato, Netflix, all of that from my phone. I'm like, whenever somebody recommends something to watch, I only download it on my phone then. I download it
Hmm.
and then I delete it again. So
Oh,
it's
that's
not
good.
it's not on my fingertips,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that habit. Okay, I'll just click on it. That is one. Second, in order to make reading books fun, I've done two things. That is one, have an accountability partner, but in a fun way. Not like we're not on each other's heads that, oh, have you read? Have you read? Not like that. We
Yeah.
just have this that whenever a new month starts,
Yeah.
we just tell each other that, okay, I'm reading this and this book this month. This is about this and this is about that. What are you reading? That's it.
Hmm.
We made it a together journey. And second,
Yeah.
I've downloaded Goodreads, the app
Okay.
where,
Hmm.
and the beauty of Goodreads is that you can actually plug in your everyday progress in it. So, for example, you've reached page number 130. So you can actually plug in, okay, I've read till page number 130, and then it'll give you a progress bar in
Hmm.
percentage. So you've kind of gamified it, so it feels like a reward anyway. It's a
Yeah.
lot more fun to do that way. So if you can gamify whatever you want to do, you'll get equal amount of dopamine as you do in Reels or Netflix.
So, Ayushi, you being an expert in all of this, and certainly, you having that insight with the experience that you have with your clients and, with the businesses that you run, do you find yourself that as an individual, you have improved in all of these areas just because of a constant, reiteration of this with the people around you? Or do you still struggle with all of this?
No, I would say the former because I have improved in a lot of places in life. Obviously, I have a lot of flaws still,
Yeah.
but it's kind of this. I'm repeating these things to people so many times. How can I not live it? How can not I not
Hmm.
embody it? Right. And as many times, if I've spoken in a podcast or to a client or at my retreat, if I'm saying this so many times, I'm reiterating it to myself also, right? And I have to not even have to. It becomes a part of the value. The more repetitions you do of something, the more ingrained it gets, right? So every
Hmm.
time I would talk about, let's say I do have a workshop called Believing in Love, and it has like a breakdown of our value systems, what makes us happy, love languages, all of that, and the way we communicate, all of that. And then if I'm saying this out loud to so many people so many times, I also get to embody it. So it's become easier that way for sure.
That's an interesting one. I think that tries to correlates to that ideology of there's a very great footballing player, Johan Cruyff, and he used to say that playing good football, like playing great football is not as hard, but playing very simple football constantly, like consistently, is even harder. So like, yeah, you are doing the simple stuff right, but doing them repeatedly is much more harder than doing one big grand thing and then just riding the boat on that. And that ties to what you were saying. But don't you find that there are certain pathways or just certain archetypes that people consistently keep falling into with just the struggles that they have? So let's say even though someone is trying to make their life more productive, but there are certain triggers that are not letting them get out of that hole. So do you definitely would encounter that with most of your clients? So how do you help them get out of a rut, even though yet they're trying to get out of it, but not really making any progress?
See, the
Or
answer
is
is
that
in your
very personal?
question itself. No, no, the answer is in your question itself. You said there are some triggers that get us off the path, right?
Yeah.
So it begins with that awareness that what are my triggers and what am I willing to do to change the impact of those triggers. There's something I love to say to my clients. Whenever I find somebody stuck in the constant loop of maybe complaining or not taking action, they'll be crying about something, but then they're not taking action about it. It's very easy. We get attached to our misery, and it's more so much more calming to just keep talking about it instead of doing something, because when we have to do something it's uncomfortable or it's a
Yeah.
lot of discomfort. I get very blunt in my coaching sessions. I am
Mm.
extremely brutal. So I tell people, want to if you want a brutally honest opinion, only then book a session with me. So I tell them, listen, you would be crying about the same thing 6 months down the line, and we'd be sitting here talking about the same thing. If you want to do
Mm.
that to yourself, then stop listening to me and go cry. I would actually say
Mm.
that because you're not ready to take action, I'll see you in 6 months and you'll be crying about the same thing. And that
Mm.
somehow hits them. Everyone I've worked with, I get them to future pace themselves, that they're 1 year older, or their whatever event is coming up in the future. I make them imagine that on that day you're still worried about the same thing because you're not
Uh,
ready to change it today.
that's a massive truth bomb. But how do they take this? How do they take this honesty? I'm sure it deters some of your clients away.
No, actually, because right now we're just speaking in English, but I mix it with Hindi and English and put in my. The thing is, I've noticed I used to initially be scared that, would people get scared if I'm that brutal? And this is just
Mm,
one incident. I'm actually very, very brutal when it comes to my coaching sessions. And sometimes that's all people need.
mm,
People, the world has coddled them so much that
yeah.
right now, what is happening? Somebody would bring up something about mental health, and then we would just coddle them. We would just
Mm,
like help them, just be there, empathetic with them, and probably some people would just have sympathy for them, but nobody would push you in the right direction. Sometimes you need a bad cop in order to move
yeah,
forward. And
definitely.
that's what I've realized. That's what I've realized, that sometimes you need to rip the bandit off, or just do it that way. Because otherwise we all get stuck in our patterns.
Mm,
We will. But we have to ask ourselves, how is this serving me? First of all, how is this pattern? For example, guilt. Guilt is that one emotion a lot of people get stuck in.
mm,
Anything they'll do, and then they'll have guilt towards it. Or anything they won't do, they'll have guilt towards it. But you tell me something. How is guilt serving you?
mm, yeah.
Guilt is such a useless emotion.
But I would want to ask you this question though. So guilt came into the picture because of some evolutionary psychology, right? There has to be some function that guilt used to serve because of the reason that we're still talking about it. Okay. So what maybe from a psychologist's point of view, is guilt a way of our body processing some emotional trauma through that channel, or is it completely useless and why did it even come into the picture?
It's it's a lot of self-preservation. I'll tell you how guilt works.
Hmm.
Of course, guilt to a very tiny amount, very healthy amount is good. It makes you self-check, like you
Yeah.
become self-aware that, okay, I'm not going to do this again. But guilt. So, see, this is something I love to do with big groups. I will ask big groups that, hey, do we all consider ourselves good people? And then everyone would be like, yeah, 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 I'm a good person, right? Even if I ask you, are you a good
Yeah.
person?
Yeah. I'm a pretty
You
good
would,
person actually.
right? But then we all make mistakes.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
all make mistakes, right? So if you've told your brain that you're a good person, and then you made a mistake and you hurt somebody or did something that may cause guilt, your guilt is actually making you believe, hey, I know you did wrong, but at least you have guilt, so that makes you a good person,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a
right? So
good.
it's a lot of self-preservation, because how can you live with the idea that you may not be 100% a good person? You may have some intrusive thoughts or bad traits, which we
Yeah.
all do, but we
Yeah.
can't admit it to ourselves.
Hmm. So is this way of life like living to an ideal character? That's a good approach to life, or should we, accept and kind of embrace our negative side as much as we do our positive side? Not, or maybe not as much, but even though still have that level of acceptance for ourselves.
The more you try to curb it, the more it will show up in your actions, or in maybe even in your dreams, or
Hmm.
in in things that you don't consciously do. Because to be human is to be polar. We have polarities
Hmm.
within us, right? You will
Yeah.
say, for example, there's so much research done on this, that you would say that you're not a racist, you're not, you know, you're very inclusive and all of that, but you do this exercise, which, has, let's say, 10 faces on a lineup,
Yeah.
and then you have to do a trust check and all of that. Like
Yeah.
it's a whole long procedure. You will find out that a lot of your choices in that research will point to you being a racist. But
Hmm.
then we are so scared to admit that we're not consciously a racist, but we've been conditioned in such a way over the years that certain things,
Yeah.
certain traits, characteristics of people, maybe skin color or the way they look. make us feel biased, but we
Yeah.
are so scared to admit it.
Hmm.
Similarly, we have polarities. We do think good most of the time, but sometimes don't you have these intrusive thoughts
Yeah.
where where you think that, oh, I wish I could just, I'm not going to
Yeah.
complete the sentence, but
Well, you should not.
so yeah, to be human is to be polar, and the more we accept it, the more at peace we will be with ourselves and not guilt trip ourselves.
Very interesting. So I read this somewhere that a lot of relationships also work this way, that it's a lot of forgiving and a lot of forgetting. And you have to first start forgiving yourself for you to even start forgiving anyone else, and that's a game changer, man. You don't even think about ever forgiving yourself. So I always thought of forgiveness as something that I can give to people around me, for someone who did something wrong, or someone who's just I think is a morally corrupt person who did some, for my peace I would have to forgive them. But then you start thinking about how many instances in your life with you that you're still carrying on, in which you haven't forgiven yourself. And, that's just extra baggage that you carry, without forgiving yourself. Maybe that is something that should be more talked about. I think, forgiveness for the self.
Absolutely. And if you could forgive other people who've done much worse, then why not forgive yourself? Why
Hmm.
not? Because, the easiest way to remind yourself that you can forgive yourself is that person you were at the time, whatever actions you took made the most sense to them. Now you know better. Back then you
Hmm.
didn't know better.
Yeah.
So in this moment also, you will do what makes sense to you the most right now. But by the time you're 27, 30, you would have evolved in such a way that when you look back, this would not make sense to you. So why carry the guilt, or why carry the shame attached to it, or anything that negative that you've attached to it?
Hmm. That's also an interesting insight. Are you a believer of, what kind of philosophy do you base your life around? Are you a believer of, like, work hard till 40 and then live my life as I want to? Or are you a believer of, seize the day, just, live today as it is, take present for what it is?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. I'm
Hmm.
leaning more towards, it's such a funny thing. When I was your age, when I was younger, YOLO came around, right? And back then
Oh,
I
you're
was
that
like,
old.
I was like, that is so cringe, right? Like, why would people say YOLO? But now, now that I'm 30, I'm like, hey, you actually do live once. So might
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
experience everything and seize the day. So that's that. But I also at the same time love planning, love investing, love saving money. So it's again polarities, right?
Hmm.
And I love both sides of me.
Let's talk about relationships. I think elephant in the room. So what is your I would want to ask this from a personal perspective. Let's say, let's keep the psychologist Ayushi aside, and let's ask this on a personal level. Do you think, in your experience, relationships are moving towards a net positive or a net negative? Or is that not a question that you'd like to answer?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. I would like to believe that people are getting more self-aware.
Hmm.
You will see that the divorce rates in my generation has increased.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as a negative. I see
Hmm.
as people choosing themselves and choosing to step out of shitty parts, right, of their
Yeah.
life. Why would you
Okay.
stick to it? But our
Hmm.
parents' generation stuck to it. Even if the relationship was really bad, they just stuck to it, right? So yeah, I'm a believer in everything. So I would like to believe that it's positive.
Well, you tell people that believe in love is your one of your workshops. I think you can't be very pro divorce, but no, but I
No, no,
think
I
that's also a
am. I
form of
am.
self love. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I am pro divorce. Like if it's
yeah,
not working out for you,
yeah,
get out.
definitely. So,
But
but
not
yeah, I,
just
I,
to
I
just
Mhm.
just to add that not pro divorce in the sense that you're not even ready to work on the relationship.
Yeah, that's the
Every
thing.
relationship takes so much effort. Don't run away from effort.
Let's talk about this relationship and effort dynamic, because I think it's very somewhere or the other, it comes into the question comes into the picture that how do you, effectively make relationships work? Is there a blueprint for a successful relationship, or is it just very personal, or are the people who are into successful relationships just winging it, or are they just too emotionally mature than the rest of the population? So you, in your experience, what do you think is an indicator of a successful relationship?
Communication.
Hmm. Yeah.
Communication. How do you communicate with your partner is going to decide whether you're going to make it or break it. And
Okay.
what you said, if there's a blueprint to a successful relationship, I know I'm like a believer in magic and believer in the universe and believer of all things, but I like to break it down to something very, very logical. I
Yeah.
think relationships have a formula. And I say this it's on some of my reels also very often, that treat your relationship like you would treat your business,
Hmm.
methodically, logically, structure, give it a structure. So one is there are three, four things that are very, very important to make the relationship work.
Yeah.
One is empathy and compassion. You cannot be with someone else, live with someone else without empathy and compassion. Because we all are different people, right? We all have our own maps of the world based on our upbringing and all of that. But how can I live with another person or spend considerable amount of time with another person if I'm not willing to be empathetic to how they behave or how what works for them, what doesn't work for them? One is that. Second is the willingness to communicate healthy in a healthy way.
Yeah.
The willingness, I'm saying. You might not have the tools right now, you can learn it, but are you even willing to sit down and have a conversation with your partner multiple times if needed to make it work? So,
Hmm.
willingness to communicate. And third is, and this is the most important, knowing yourself very, very well. If you don't know yourself well, how will you communicate what are you expecting from that relationship? We get lost in this loop, right? That we don't know ourselves, but we feel overwhelmed or we feel negatively. And then we can't even communicate it to our partner that what made us feel bad. So, this is a question I ask. I like to say there's this quote that love is the only thing that can give us true joy, true happiness. Then why do we suffer in love the most?
Yeah.
Right? One of the biggest reasons is miscommunication, especially in expectations. Every
Hmm.
relationship is a give and take. It is offers and expectations. What I can offer you and what I can expect from you. So let's not run away from our human nature of expecting things from close ones. Yes,
Yeah.
we expect, but the other person is not a mind reader, right? How will
Hmm.
they know what you want until you actually communicate that? But how can you communicate that? Until and unless you know yourself fully.
And how does a person know themselves fully? I think that's a journey that you take throughout your life. Like at no point I would be
Yep,
confident enough to say I know myself fully.
absolutely. You won't know your evolving parts, but you'll know your core principles that you function on. For example,
Hmm.
your values, your core values, right? So authenticity and honesty is two of my core values. So that will reflect in my relationships also. So if I'm seeing someone else not be authentic, it will
Yeah.
bother me, right?
Hmm.
So you understanding your core values, five, six values that you run on every day, that is the start. Second, you understanding what is it that actually makes you happy. Have you ever sat down and made a list of what are the things that make me happy?
Hmm.
Hardly people would have done that.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what exactly makes you happy, how will you tell this to your partner?
Hmm. See, it's a very interesting, also, it's a segue to so many conversations. So I was recently finished this book by Jordan Peterson, and so he is very big on talking about fixing your goals. in any matter of
Hmm.
life, and fixing where the goalpost is. Because if you essentially don't know what the goal is, then you can't never fail. And that is the reason people don't set goals. The reason why people don't write the things that make them happy is because then they would know that these are the things that make me happy, and I know that I'm not doing them. Then essentially they would get that feeling of failure. So it's a loop of not consciously not choosing to know what you know want to know. So it's a very crazy, I just feel psychological way of living, to just be constantly distracted. And that's what I think the modern world is getting really good at. So it's very easy to be numbed throughout the day, and without using any drugs. It's just you have social media, you have work, you have so many things, you have food apps on your phone, you have so many games, you just have a plethora of distractions. You wouldn't need anything else to just get through your day and not even feel and be numb throughout the day. You might take a coffee, you might go out for a smoke, and you would just essentially sit with yourself. And I think that's the part where you never realize, okay, what made you happy, what were your goals. And that's how you essentially don't fail. And that gives you maybe that reward mechanism of, okay, even though I'm living this way, but I am still, let's say, better than this half of the population or something like that. I think that's I feel that hypothesis is very correct. What are your thoughts?
It is one part of it is it's constant escapism, and that's deep rooted in our biology. It's not just
Oh.
this generation. It's not just the modern world. It's just that modern world has all these things, right? Like you can order a coffee in 10 minutes and all of that. We have a lot of numbing tactics now
Hmm.
that are visible to us, but there were a lot of numbing tactics earlier also, just different, that we might not do. The problem is that we are wired to be lazy because our bodies and our subconscious mind has to be efficient, right? So it's just trying to conserve energy. So
Hmm.
we are biologically wired to be lazy, first of all, and you're biologically wired to avoid discomfort, which is why you would rather keep escaping rather than actually put in the work, because putting in the work will be a few days of discomfort, right?
Yeah.
So it's like going to the gym analogy, right? The first month is gonna hurt like anything, but you won't go because it's putting your body through discomfort. So many people fail to stick to a workout routine.
Yeah.
The At the end of the day, the gist of what the crux of all of this is, can I be stronger than my brain? Can I be stronger than my wiring of my subconscious mind?
Yeah.
So that thing that Jordan Peterson is also saying, that your desire to get to the goalpost has to be stronger than what you're biologically wired to do.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And also, in general, I think I read this quote that and we choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven all day. And maybe that is the
Yep.
reason why people choose to stay into toxic relationships, even though
Yeah.
they know that they're doing them a lot of harm. But I want to understand this from your perspective, that why does that happen? Is there a physiological aspect to it? Like, why do we choose to stay in a, or maybe someone staying in a job that they don't like for 20 years, or someone staying in a marriage, or someone just staying with a habit? Why do we do that to ourselves?
Very simply put, is our fear of abandonment is the highest form of fear we ever have. So fear of abandonment is much greater than fear of abuse. So we will take abuse
Oh,
but not want to feel abandoned.
damn, that's crazy. Where does that come from? Fear of abandonment.
It's it's a lot of things. See, again, it will keep coming back to you. You'll keep feeling the fear of abandonment if you feel that when people abandon you, you are abandoned. Basically, it's I'm saying the same thing, but see it this way, right? Two parts. When people abandon you, you are abandoned, but you're
Hmm.
not. If people can just embrace the fact that rejection or abandonment is nothing personal, it's not personal, it is something that you didn't fit in that place, right? So even if, let's not go to relationships yet, right? We'll discuss that later. But jobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are people doing? They are constantly giving 14 hours work days and all of that. But where is that 14-hour workday coming from? For very few people, it's coming out of passion. Most of the people, it's coming out of fear.
Mm.
So if I don't do this, my boss won't give me a good appraisal. If I don't do this, I might lose my job. So it's always fear driven.
Yeah.
And when we lose something, we start feeling abandoned. But we forget that we always have ourselves. We have
Mm.
ourselves, right? So when let's say your partner leaves you, you are with you. Can you remind yourself of that? You've
Yeah.
not abandoned yourself, but it's so difficult to remind, no. All of it comes down to, again, your relationship with yourself. If your relationship with yourself is very solid, like you know how to take care of you, and you know that other people's actions and choices are their own and they don't have any reflection on you
Yeah.
and your personality or your characteristics, then even if you're abandoned, you're not really abandoned.
That's that I sometimes find that I kind of, implement this in my own life, and I just feel that sense of inner peace sometimes, that maybe, yeah, it's about fostering that self relationship, I guess. But I sometimes find that even though you are stuck into a situation, or even though you are stuck into any form of engagement which is not how you want it to be ideally, if you are very strong and peaceful at your core, like if you are at terms with yourself, then there's a lot of detachment also that comes with it. So you're very, like, there's a stoic way to approach these things as well, and I feel that that is way better than anything else, and that's exactly the way you describe it. It's like I can only control my actions, I can only control what is in my control,
Yeah.
and I can only identify that, and I can get really good at identifying that what is in my control, and let that only affect how I perceive or how I view my life. If I know that
Mm.
moving this cup from here to there is in my control, and if it's a dirty cup and I can put it into the sink, that's in my control. And let's say if I keep worrying about, okay, XYZ did, if this will happen, then that will happen, and then keep thinking about all of those hens and eggs, then that doesn't even take me anywhere, and I think it takes control from my life, because then I'm giving that up on basis of this happening, that happening, and then that leading to something me doing. So again, maybe stoicism is something which feels very natural to me, because I feel that's a way of life which allows you to just be very objective in your actions and be very objective in the way you approach
Mm.
things. It's hard to, I think the only challenge with life is just, it's very hard to remember all of this stuff in daily life. I can sit back and then maybe think about all of these things. I can, recognize the patterns that you do, or maybe through your journaling habits, I'm sure your clients would come back to you and say, okay, recognize that I was doing this when I read through my journal entries. But it's very hard to constantly keep in touch with these philosophies or ideologies.
You can function on these principles, but at the end of the day, all our decisions are emotionally driven. All our decisions are emotionally driven. And whenever I talk to men, it's so difficult for them to digest because there's this notion that, oh, women are more emotional and their
Oh no,
decisions are
sweetheart, you
emotionally
are more
driven.
emotional.
No, it's not more or less. All humans, all our
Okay.
decisions are emotionally driven. It's
Yeah.
just that the way society brings up men versus women, you're very good at rationalizing it very quickly. In like
Hmm.
milliseconds, you will rationalize it. And then you'll fool yourself that, okay, this was a rational decision. So it's not actually. All of
Yeah.
us are emotional beings. So it's okay. Again, comes back to polarity. Yes, I am a stoic, but I also emotionally, like, if I had to say in Hindi, fatti to meri bhi hai, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
have all the tools, but I also get scared. It's
Yeah.
okay, right? And detachment, I'm not a fan of that word because people use it in a very wrong way. They're like, oh,
Hmm.
if you're this sorted and if you're this If you invest so much in self-work and self-love, that means all your relationships stop mattering to you. That's not
Hmm.
the right thing. It's just that you just get to know how to set healthy boundaries. You know how to not let other people walk all over you. Things like that happen. You just stop being a people pleaser. You stop being a doormat. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're not in love with them or you're not attached to them.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap in that, but we don't understand it. Most people don't understand it.
I think detachment. I don't know if this is exactly from Gita, and I wouldn't quote it, but there's a way to understand detachment, and it is like if you're sitting in a room full of luxury, and if you're sitting in a room
Hmm.
full of your wants, then detachment is not that you think that you own these things, or like you are owned by these things. It's that you can sit in the center of everything that you want and not be owned by them. Essentially, the things that you
Hmm.
own start owning you as well. So I think
Hmm.
that is a philosophy or detachment, that s- do things own you, or do you own things? That's where the switch kind of switches when it comes to detachment. But let me ask you a question which might get me some Instagram reel views. So guys and girls, this is a problem I've come across in general, that into relationships, this is a huge debate, that when a girl is complaining about, let's say, she had a bad day, or this is something that's wrong in her life or a day, then the guy's tendency is to just start giving solutions, and okay, let's fix this, let's fix that, and then it's sorted. And then that really pisses off the girlfriends or the wives. And I would want you to
Yeah.
enlighten me on why that happens.
Because a lot of times women are just looking to be heard, and they're maybe just looking for you to keep crib with them also. A lot of times, but men don't see that,
But
right?
men don't
They'll
function that way. That's what I'm
No,
asking
it's
you.
not true. It's not true. In my relationship, it's the other way around.
Oh,
I
okay.
I had two solutions like this. Like, okay, let's talk about solutions. Not always like 50-50, but
Yeah.
so yeah, so men, like I was saying, men rationalize things so quickly, and for them, nobody has actually held space for them since childhood to actually sit with their emotions. When does it happen in a man's life that they can just sit and cry about something and not do something about it? At
Hmm.
least give themselves that 1 hour. This 1 hour, I will just sit and grieve. I don't think anybody has allowed men to do that ever. It's
Hmm.
always been solution driven. Okay, ये हो गया ना? Let's see what we can do about it. ठीक है? Even men amongst themselves, they're like, अच्छा भाई तेरा breakup हो गया, चल दारू पीते हैं. Right? Like
Hmm.
something. It'll
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be
yeah.
like an action
Hmm.
instead of, okay, sit with me and talk to me how you're feeling. Tell me
Yeah.
the last time a guy asked you, okay, sit and tell me how you're feeling. Or ever, if they've asked you.
I would be more concerned for the guy asking me this.
But why is this the society norm? Do you
Yeah.
not have feelings?
No, but I get your point. Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's how, and somewhere I saw in some reel or something, I saw that the problem in relationships arise because the guys treat their girlfriends like one of the guys.
So yeah, but coming back to your, yeah, that's a great punchline, man. I think you should get that on a T-shirt or something. That might sell. Not one of
Like
the guys.
stop treating your girlfriends as one of the boys. Right?
Mm,
Ask her, how are you feeling? So one of
yeah,
the best solutions for this is, whether you're a man or a woman or any other gender, whenever somebody comes to you complaining about something, before you assume what they need, ask, hey, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to give you a solution for this? Or
yeah.
would you want me to just sit with you and complain with you? A lot of
Mm,
times, if a woman is ranting about somebody, right, they just want you to also add to the rant. Ah, yeah, you're so right. Exactly. Right? That's all they
even
want.
even though, and what is ideal communication? Now I want you to say this on record, that should you just rant for the sake of it, or should you give them like honest feedback? Oh no, this was your mistake. Maybe you were in the wrong. No, that guy was being just.
First, you pacify that need.
Yeah,
There is a need to rant, right? They're ranting, or anybody is complaining or ranting because they're feeling emotionally overwhelmed right now.
yeah,
Let's get to a conclusion of that. And then when we shift to our logical minds, that's when, hey, would you like to explore how you could have also done something? This is something my partner did with me early on. I was ranting about my previous relationship,
yeah.
and he just outright asked me, what do you think? Where could you have gone wrong in that relationship? And oh
Hmm.
my God, my respect for him went like 10 folds that day. I was like, wow, this person loves me, but he's not just limiting it to seeing me as this angel. He's actually making me also see my flaws.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think just by you validating this approach, now we might see a surge of all of these people who end up watching this show. They asking any of their potential hinge matches or bumble matches. Okay, what did maybe you did wrong in your last relationship? And the girl not being as psychologically aware as you, and she be going like, "Tu chup hi reh."
No, there's a way to bring these things up. There's a
Yeah,
way to have crucial conversations, I say.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it begins with you doing this empathetically and kindly. You can't just go tell a person that, hey, teri bhi galti hogi, right? Like then
yeah,
to they'll get defensive.
yeah.
The way you talk to them matters.
Hmm. I think a lot of wisdom imparted by you in this episode. I just want one last question for you to answer, and then we can wrap this up. Is based on judgment, and I want you to help me with something which makes me less judgmental or makes me more empathetic. Makes anyone less judgmental or more empathetic post hearing this conversation. Do you think there is a certain shift in perspective that we can use, or something like that, which helps us to be more empathetic in nature?
Hmm. It begins with the one thing that is, we all have different maps of the world.
Hmm.
Even two siblings who've grown up in the same household see things very differently.
Hmm.
So, for example, let's take a very simple example. We get mango ice cream right now.
Yeah.
How you would feel having the same mango ice cream versus how I would feel having the same mango ice cream will be so different. We
Yeah.
both can't have the same experiences of whatever we are experiencing because our experience and our emotional response to it is based on our childhood, our upbringing, our everything that has happened with us till now. So
Yeah.
if you and I are different, how can I judge you? How can I expect you to have the same map of the world as I do?
Hmm. Yeah.
So we just have to keep reminding ourselves that, there's a lot of positive judgment also people do, like on the different side, where they'll be looking at someone privileged or looking at someone who has a great business or a great job, and then they'll compare themselves to them, that he's my age or she's my age and they're able to do this,
Yeah.
right? How come they have such a successful business at my age?
Yeah.
Because the ingredients were so different. You have no idea how their parents spoke to them growing up. You
Yeah.
have no idea how they speak to themselves. So if they're so different than you, what is the point of having judgment?
That's a very solid one. I think that's easy to remember, and that's easy to inculcate in general when you are living in a society. I think a great conversation with you, Ayushi. You are certainly a person with the wit, humor, and the depth that I would say a psychologist requires. So you've completely blown me away with all the insights that you have, and I think it's a way of communicating them so that it doesn't get overwhelming. uh, Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you
Love
for your
this
kind
conversation.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm very, very surprised that I'm not generalizing, but you're 23 and you're Gen Z, but the depth of understanding you have with every concept, I loved it. Like, I must have thought of it 5 times in my head. That, wait, this guy is 23. So good
Just
for you.
getting started.
You're gonna have great relationships then.
Well, let's see. I'll clip this out and I'll show this post every fight in the future whenever I've got the psychologist's proof.
Show it to your potential girlfriend. See?
Yeah, I'll put this up. Thank you so much, Ayushi, for taking the
Awesome.
time out.
Thank you so
It was
much.
lovely talking to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.